Do you consider it a badge of honor to multitask? I got some news for you. Multitasking is something you should not do. Multitasking is not making you more productive. Now, this may be a little hard to hear, but it's the truth. Here's what happens. The more things you try to do, the efficiency of everything you do decreases. If you do two things, and then you do a third and a fourth and a fifth, you're just juggling. You're rapidly switching between these tasks, and every task you work on, every project you're trying to work and juggle at the same time, the efficiency decreases. I want to share with you 3 ideas about multitasking. Number 1, we're going to talk about the consequences of multitasking. Number 2, context switching. And number 3, attention residue. And I'm going to wrap it all up in a bow and tell you what you should do instead. So let's talk about multitasking. Like I just mentioned, multitasking is when you try to do more than one thing at a time. You're switching between this task and project and this task and project and that task and project. The problem is, as I alluded a few minutes ago, your efficiency for everything you're doing decreases. And there's no set amount of the decrease. Because if you're working on one task, you're not operating at 100%. So let's say, pick a number out of thin air. Let's say your efficiency is 80%. Now you're working on 2 tasks. Maybe your efficiency drops to 60%. Add a third task, maybe down 40%. There's no exact number. The point is, you cannot multitask. In fact, neuroscience has proven the brain can only do one thing at a time. So when you're trying to juggle multiple tasks or multiple projects at the same time, guess what happens? Your brain is only doing one thing at a time. It's just rapidly switching between tasks. You think you're multitasking, but the brain is incapable of multitasking. So what are some of the consequences of being a multitasker? Well, number 1, obviously, your productivity takes an enormous hit because remember, your efficiency decreases with everything you add on to it. And of course, when you're not as productive, you don't get things done, which causes you frustration, overwhelm, and anxiety. So the moral of the story is, forget about multitasking. Now let's talk about context switching. Context switching is when you rapidly go from task A to task B to task C to task A to task C to task B to task D, and you're just going back and forth. What happens is you're working on project A, you're working on task A. Now you switch on B, but you just finished A, or maybe you didn't finish A. So A is just hanging out there. Now you're working on B, and then maybe C. Now you say, well, I'm not really doing that. Oh, but you are. You are writing a blog post, for example, and you see you got an email. So you go to your email tab, and now you're reading the email. And then you notice, hey, I got a text message. So you pick up your phone or you read your text message on your desktop. What happens is you are switching between task and task. They don't have to be related. What happens is you are spreading yourself, your mental capacity, way too thin. My favorite topic that comes along the lines of multitasking is attention residue. This is so important. I want you to hear me very clearly. Let's say you're working on task A and you say, okay, I don't want to work on task A anymore. I'm going to switch to task B. So you start working on task B. Your brain, part of your brain is still thinking about task A. You may have consciously disconnected from task A and start working on task B, but your brain did not cut the line and forget about task A. So you're working on task B. Meanwhile, your brain's going, I got some other ideas for task A. But wait, it gets worse. Now you switch from task B to task C. Now, your brain may still be considering task A and task B. Attention residue is real. Attention residue is when you go from task A to task B, but you haven't completely disconnected from task A. Now you may say, well, That's normal. What can I do to prevent attention residue? Don't go from task A to task B to task C. What I highly recommend you do is when you are done with task A, make sure you completely disconnect from task A. So you close the file, you close the tabs, you put away your notebooks, and you take a break. Get up from your work area. You walk someplace else. Maybe you do some quick meditation, some quick deep breathing, something that separates you from task A to task B. Now, when you start task B, depending on how long it is before you start it, you're still going to be thinking about task A. It's human nature. Our brains do not get turned on and turned off like a switch. But you have to come to a point where you say, I am no longer going to be working on task A. I'm going to switch to task B. Do not just switch like a light switch. Find a way to disconnect from task A. I highly encourage you to take a break. Maybe you can watch a funny YouTube video, not a 1-hour YouTube video, maybe a 5 or 6 minute YouTube video. Maybe go for a walk around the block. Disconnect as much as you can from task A. Then when you pick up task B, you have reduced, not eliminated, the attention residue. Now, this is why I work in a 50-10 Pomodoro technique. What I'll do is I will work for 50 minutes. Then I'll take a 10-minute break. Now, I have found that 10-minute break is enough to disconnect from the task I was just working on. So we have multitasking. We have context switching. We have attention residue. What is the solution? Well, it's not too hard to imagine. It's called single tasking. Single tasking. Single tasking is when you work on one project. So, for example, let's say you're going to spend 45 minutes on social media. That's all you do. You don't try to text. You don't try to look in your email. You don't try to write a blog post or listen to a podcast. You focus on social media. When you're done with social media, you take a break, and then I'm going to work on my blog post. So when you work on your blog post, you mute your phone or you turn your phone off, you close all the social media tabs, you open up your word processor or whatever you're doing to write the blog post, and that's all you do. You do one thing at a time. It's called single tasking. Single tasking. A lot of people think single tasking is for wimps. No, single tasking is for smart people. Single tasking is for the most productive people in our society. There's an author I really enjoy reading. His name is Cal Newport. He's written 2 of my favorite books. One is called Deep Work. One is called Digital Minimalism. I highly recommend you pick up both of these books. Do you realize he's not on social media? Do you realize that you can't get a hold of him via email? You can go to his website. There's no email address there. When he writes his books, which are New York Times bestsellers, you know what he does? He goes someplace where there's no technology and he writes his books. A lot of authors do this. Why? They're focused only on writing their books. So when they write the books and they release the book, we're like, wow, this is amazing. It's amazing because they weren't on Facebook and Instagram and in their email, texting their friends and trying to write the book. They're focused on writing the book. I encourage you to change your life so you're focusing on one thing at a time. Now, will you be able to do this every day for the rest of your life? Of course not. Life is going to happen. But when you really need to focus on a project, write a blog post, create a podcast episode, launch a YouTube channel, I don't care what it is, write a book. I want you to give yourself the gift and give us the gift of doing your best work. You do your best work when you focus, when you single task. So again, remember, you can't multitask. The brain is incapable of multitasking. I think God created the brain for that very reason because he knew that multitasking won't work. So we're trying to multitask. The brain can't do it. We're just rapidly switching. Context switching, when you're going from task to task to task, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, that's not effective. And attention residue, that's going to happen. You're going to have attention residue because we're human beings. But do whatever you can to single task. If you've been trying to multitask for years, you're not just going to be able to flip a switch and all of a sudden, boom, hey, you are an awesome single tasker. It's going to take time. It's going to take patience. It's going to take a lot of pain. But if you stick with it, you'll get there. Single tasking is where it's at. So I hope this episode really served you well. I know it's hard to hear that multitasking isn't a real thing. Single tasking is the key to your productivity. Now go take what I shared with you in this episode, go apply it, give yourself grace that you won't get it right the first time, the 10th time, the 50th time. But the more you work on single tasking, the better off you're going to be. Thank you for watching. Hey, Rockstar. Thank you so much for reaching the end of the podcast. I truly appreciate your time and attention. So I want to help you more. And the best way to do that is for you to head on over to my website, MrProductivity.com, MISTER, MrProductivity.com. There you can sign up for my free email newsletter, find out about my coaching. Matter of fact, everything and anything, well, except for my credit card numbers and social security number, you can find out at MrProductivity.com. Thank you so much again for your attention. And until we meet again, my friend, which will be sooner than you think, or maybe you'd like, depending on your perspective, don't forget, stay productive and stay